Hi, this is Diane, and I just want to show the little junk journal that I made for a swap on Junk Journal Junkies. It was supposed to be completely made out of recycled materials, junk mail, things like that. Nothing new. So, this is what I made. I should measure it for you. It's, let's see, a little over 5 inches by just over 8 inches. So the pages within are 5 by 8. This is the the cover is an old book that I had gotten from the library, quite old, and it's a fabric covered book, and it's a burgundy color, and I really liked the color, so I pretty much let that show through, especially on the back. But excuse me, where the dust jacket had been taped to it, there were marks here and on the back also, so I had to cover the marks left from the tape. And then the edges where the book was taken apart were raw, so I covered them up with some strips, just some leftover strips of paper that I had. And this one, I didn't even cut off the title of the paper because it's called This and That, and I thought that was pretty appropriate for a junk journal. And I put that word commemorate on it from the Tim Holtz Tiny Words, or whatever that little collection is called. So, this is cut from an old music book. Did You Ever See a Lassie was the name of the song, and I really liked the little girl illustration. The song itself is in the book, and I just used her on the front, and she's actually attached as a pocket, so this tag will be in there. I'm going to put something in some fiber or something in there. These are old buttons. My mother used to own a fabric shop, and these are old buttons left over from her shop. When she closed it, she gave me a bag full of buttons. And then this little paper penny, shiny, I don't even know where I picked it up somewhere. I found it laying on the ground and thought it was cute, so I picked it up, and I've had it, so I just glued that on too. So inside, I left the library book there because it has the label, and I believe I covered up the date there. I think it had a date on it, and I think it was from the 1940s. So it just made it look junkier, I thought. This is something that I had printed. I'm holding on to my camera, trying it that way instead of the tripod, so bear with me. This was something I printed, and I was running out of ink, so the color wasn't quite right. So I just had it set aside, and so that made it into my junk pile. But it looks like a book cover, so I folded it into a little book, inked the edges, stamped the corners, and put a tab on it. This is something we got in the mail from Dish Network. I'm so sorry, I'm recovering from pneumonia. This was a little pocket, and it says refer a friend, and I like the picture of the little boys on there. And on the back I put some ledger paper, and it came with a little card inside, so I just glued some scraps of notebook paper on that so it can be used for journaling. All the papers that I used in here are either torn out of books, old books, or there's just scraps. This is from a book, and I took some scraps of notebook paper and just zigzag stitched it. They're loose here, and I just zigzagged it on there, so that can be used for journaling. Here is a piece of packaging, and on the back I glued on this little sack that was from a wedding that I went to. It had some Jordan almonds inside as a favor. So I attached that to that, and then there's a tag inside from a piece of clothing. I thought it was a pretty cool tag. It's Jennifer Lopez, and it has this cool little clip on the end, so whoever gets this can use that for something interesting, maybe. Here's a cute frog out of a book. This book was about collections, things that people collect, and so this section was on. Little porcelain frogs or something. But I like this frog with the crown on his head. This was a scrap of scrapbook paper. It says happiness, so I just glued that on. I put some tabs on throughout the book. Here's an old security envelope. I had gotten this with a packet of paper ephemera, cards and things at the Goodwill. So it is an old envelope. And I stamped this key on it. And inside is a tag that I had stamped on and colored a little bit, and this was just stuck in my drawer of miscellaneous stuff. I had our church got rid of a lot of flannel graph that used to tell the Bible stories to the Sunday school kids. They don't use the flannel graph anymore, so they just got rid of it. And I've always loved flannel graph. So they were giving it away instead of just throwing it away, so I took several envelopes full of it, and I really didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I took a couple of the pieces and just glued them onto the back of the envelope. Here is a page out of a book, and here is a scrap of scrapbook paper, and I had this shipping tag that I had practiced distressing technique on, so I just clipped that on there. And there's a picture of Alexander the Great. Here is just a piece of, I used to work for American Greetings, and that was one of the little reordering tags that I would scan when I wanted to order cards. So I put that in there, put this little fabric tag on there, and a piece of journaling notebook paper. This is from the back of a notebook. I thought it was pretty, and I like that it has this elastic on it. So I just trimmed the edge off it and bound it in here and put this little journaling card in. Here's a CD envelope, and I put a little washi tape on it to cover up the writing that was on it. And this is a scrap of Tim Holtz paper, and this is a little illustration out of a kid's book. And then inside is this card from the library. They're doing a promotion called What Do You Geek? And they have a bunch of different cards with things that people geek. I geek engineering, I geek superheroes. So that's just their program that they're doing right now, so I put that card in there. Here is an advertisement from a magazine for detergent, but it looks like it's a bejeweled Tide bottle, and there's all kinds of diamonds there. And I just glued this little card on there and put a game card inside. And then this is the back of that magazine page. This was from a Stampin' Up! Calendar. They used to sell blank calendars that you could decorate. And then when that year was over, I cut off the parts that I had stamped and decorated and just saved them. So this one got trimmed and put into this little book. And on the back, I just put on some scraps from Graphic 45, a little journaling spot, and a little scrap of music paper. Here's an envelope with a window in it, and a payphone that I cut out with my Cricut. I had a bunch of things that I had cut out and have just set aside, so I used some of those in this book, and I put a strip of paint chip in there. Here's a piece from a children's book. Here's another telephone from my Cricut, and this is glued to a magazine page. And then this is something I had printed off the internet. And here's the magazine page. I just thought it was a pretty picture. Gilt Trip, G-I-L-T, because this is all gold. Says, Prudence in the Golden Land. And then on the back, just a scrap of paper, another piece of that numbered paper that I had printed from the internet. Here's a page from a little Noah's Ark book, and it had a circle cut in it. So I put another page behind it from another children's book with a little chipmunk in the window. And then on the back of that, I glued this illustration from another book. Here's another piece of packaging from Tim Holtz, and this piece of scrap of ledger paper got in the way when I was misting something with some ink sprays. So I saved that scrap and use it here. Here's a little punched paper with a leftover sticker. And then this is one of the embellishments that I had made with little bits and pieces. I had just glued all of these together in sort of a banner shape. So I pulled that out. It was just the right size to fit on this packaging. Here's a page from Pride and Prejudice, and I folded over this strip of paper, edge punched it, stitched it on there, and then also stitched on these little pieces, scraps, game piece. They're all just stitched on there. And there's the illustration on the other side. Here's another page out of a book that got sprayed, and it got sprayed through a stencil. You can see some of the old photographs that were on the page. And on this side, I just attached another scrap. This was just a leftover scrap, and it got punched, and here's a strip of paper left over, and then I stamped down there. And this is also left over from when I worked for American Greetings. This is the back of the, the card that goes behind the cards that says what the category is. And I glued this little scrap from the music book on as a pocket and stitched these pennants on, and then in the pocket I put in these flashcards. On the back of that I put some leftover pieces of graph paper and notebook paper that I sprayed with coffee, and a strip of scrapbook paper. Here's a little bingo card that I got out of an old game. This was a piece of mail from the post office, and it's a little bit adhesive on the back so it sticks. And I glued on this piece of scrapbook paper and put on these little metal pieces that I've had for quite a while. Here's a piece that I had stamped a long time ago. It's got some little seed pearls on it, and a leftover piece of time card in there, and I stitched a game card on there to cover up my address. Here's from a book, American flag on it. This is from a French textbook, and I sprayed it, put a tag on it. And this is from our local PA representative, notepad from her office, and I glued it to a small calendar page and then put some little tidbits on it. Here's from a budget page from an old planner that I had, a calendar page from an old planner, and I stamped some faces on it and on the back also. This is packaging from a pound of butter. I just thought that packaging looked really cool, and so I turned it into a pocket, took a piece of old manila folder and stamped on it, and some journaling on the back. From a book, a tag that I printed from the internet, stitched on there, and some stitching, some pieces there. A couple of flashcards. This is from Applebee's. This is a piece of glassine that they put in their baskets of chicken tenders, and I asked for an unused one. And then because I liked, it has all these cool writing on it. So I folded it up and turned it into a pocket, and then put a few more pieces of that flannel graph in there, a shepherd and some sheep. And here's another page from another old planner, and I stamped Life is Good. Oh, and I glued that on. It's from a magazine onto the back of that glassine. And I stamped up there. This is from where my husband works, Schwann's. He leaves these little post-it note things on people's doors when they're not home when he comes. So I stitched this little scrapbook paper on there to cover up the sticky note part. This is something I had picked up when I was in New York City. And here's a window envelope, and I stamped that and put this little strip from a book in there. I don't know who this book is going to. It might be someone from another country, and I thought it'd be cool to have some United States stuff in there. And here is the book, or the music book page. Did you ever see a Lassie? The little girl on the front of the book came from. Here's a game sheet and another game sheet. And this is from another book, another song book of songs from different countries. And this one is Hungary. This is from a magazine, and I glued it to the back of that game sheet. And that's the back. There's an old library pocket with a date due sheet in there that was actually stamped. And that's the end. So I don't know who will be receiving this, but I hope that they like it. I really had fun making it. Thanks for watching.